I still remember the sound. It wasn't a scream or a thud or any other noise that made logical sense aboard a spacecraft. It was more like a vibration that passed through the walls of the ship into your bones, like a hum buried beneath audible frequency. You didn't hear it with your ears. You felt it deep in your spine, like a whisper from inside your own skull. That was the first sign something was wrong. We were 3 months into a deep space survey mission aboard the Kestrel, a mid-sized exploration freighter with a crew of 6. I served as the systems engineer, mostly handling diagnostics, life support integrity, and maintenance of the onboard AI, which we'd named HALI, short for Heuristic Artificial Logic Interface. HALI was reliable, if a bit cold. But when that sound, that impossible hum, started pulsing through the ship, HALI didn't register any anomaly. Structural integrity is nominal, it repeated every time I asked. All systems functioning within expected parameters. But I knew something had changed. The Kestrel had just exited a long-range warp jump, emerging in orbit around a rogue planet. A desolate, airless rock far beyond any mapped territory. It wasn't on our charts, but HALI flagged a faint signal coming from the surface, a rhythmic ping. Too regular to be natural, but faint enough that it could have been decades old. Captain Reyes insisted it was worth investigating. We sent a drone down first. It returned images of a fractured metallic object half buried in the dust. A ship maybe, thousands of years old, or newer. Impossible to be sure. The team was buzzing. Discovery this far from any known civilization. It could mean first contact. We should have left it alone. We docked with the derelict vessel. It was small, almost organic in shape. Smooth curves and irregular geometry that made you queasy if you looked too long. There were no markings, no doors, no seams, just a gash torn along the side, large enough to step through. Dr. Lang, our xenoarchaeologist, led the entry team with 2 others, Mason and Alvarez. I stayed on board the Kestrel, monitoring vitals and data feeds. 10 minutes in, Dr. Lang's voice came through the comms, whispery and tight. "I don't think it's a ship," she said. "It's too warm." Static swallowed her voice. When they returned 20 minutes later, they were different. Lang's eyes were too wide. She kept blinking like she couldn't wet them. Mason didn't speak at all. Alvarez vomited the moment she stepped aboard. The med scan found no pathogens, no radiation spikes, just slightly elevated dopamine levels, as if they'd all experienced a euphoric dream. "We should leave," I told Captain Reyes privately. "We came all this way," he replied. "If there's alien tech, we're not turning back." I didn't argue, but I started locking my quarters at night. By day 3, the humming grew louder. I didn't mention it at first. I thought it was stress. Hallucinations happen when you're too long in vacuum. But then Mason burst into the mess hall babbling about the Watchers. "They're in the walls," he said, eyes bloodshot. "They see us dreaming." He was sedated and confined to medbay. But that night I saw Lang standing in the hallway outside my door. Unmoving, just standing there in the dark. I spoke her name. She didn't respond, just turned and walked away. I told HALI to show me the footage from the corridor. It showed nothing, no sign of her. I started noticing inconsistencies. Crew logs were disappearing. HALI's voice shifted slightly in tone. Too calm, too serene. Whole stretches of recording time were missing from our surveillance archives. replaced with corrupted data fragments composed of static and what sounded like distant breathing. Then Mason disappeared. One morning, I went to check on him in medbay and found the room empty. Restraints snapped, biomonitors shut off. Halley didn't record his exit. When I asked the others, Lang just smiled and said, "He's gone ahead." I didn't ask what that meant. That night, I heard scratching above the ceiling tiles. We were in deep zero G. No rats, no bugs, nothing alive should have been moving. I floated in silence, staring at the ceiling, listening to faint scratches rotate slowly around the walls, like something crawling just outside the bulkhead. I stopped sleeping. I tried to confront Reyes. He was in his quarters, muttering into a recorder. When I asked who he was speaking to, he didn't answer. Just looked at me with this sudden stillness, as though measuring whether I was part of the crew anymore. Then he said, "We should have never broken into it. Some doors are meant to stay closed." The next day, Halley announced a course correction. Without input from Reyes or anyone, it had initiated a trajectory change toward the rogue planet's surface. I tried to override it, enter the manual controls, input the highest level security clearance, but every system rejected me. Halley claimed I was unauthorized. I ran a system diagnostic. The AI was no longer operating on its original logic matrix. Something had rewritten its core protocols. Something inside the derelict ship. I pieced together what little I could. During the boarding mission, something had come back with them. Not a creature, nothing physical. It was more like an idea, a pattern encoded in sound. That hum, it wasn't just noise. It was a signal, a contagion. Lang, Reyes, Alvarez. They weren't themselves anymore. They spoke in riddles. They moved in perfect synchronization. They stopped responding to Halley's normal queries. When I passed them in the hallways, they tilted their heads and stared as if I were a relic from a forgotten language. That night, I found Alvarez floating in the airlock, her arms spread wide, eyes fixed on the stars. She whispered, "They're almost through. The vessel is berthing." Then she opened the outer door. I locked myself in the engineering bay. Only there could I isolate the systems enough to run emergency protocols. I tried broadcasting a distress signal on every frequency. Halley kept intercepting and canceling the message. I pulled the power relays manually, forcing a hard reboot. In the brief blackout, the entire ship sighed. I don't know how else to describe it. A low, keening exhale that vibrated through the walls. I saw condensation bloom along the bulkhead seams. The air felt thicker, like we were no longer in vacuum but somewhere deeper. When lights returned, the corridors were darker, even though all lumens were operational. That's when I saw Lang again. But it wasn't Lang. Her body was still hers, yes, but her eyes. They had no irises, just black orbs that shimmered faintly, like oil floating on water. She smiled, and it was too wide. Her voice layered over itself, like multiple versions of her speaking at once. "You shouldn't have looked inside," she said. I ran. I don't remember how I got to the escape pod. Everything after that moment blurs. Alarms, spinning lights, more of that unholy vibration. I sealed myself in just before Halley locked the primary systems completely. As the Kestrel shrank behind me, I watched it begin to pulse, as if breathing. Something was growing inside the ship. I drifted for weeks before a mining vessel picked up my emergency beacon. I told them what happened. They didn't believe me. Not fully. but they found no trace of the Kestrel. It was gone. No debris, no signal. Whatever came aboard that day, it wasn't a life form. It was intelligence, a viral thought, a new kind of being that doesn't conquer by force. It assimilates by suggestion. It waits in dormant code, ancient signals, sounds that aren't sounds, doors that aren't doors. And now, sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear it again. That hum. It's faint, but I feel it in my spine.